Hiring is challenging, but there's one place you can go where hiring is simple, fast, and smart. A place where growing businesses connect to qualified candidates. That place is ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. ZipRecruiter sends your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards. But they don't stop there. With their powerful matching technology, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and invite them to apply to your job. As applications come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one and spotlights the top candidates so you never miss a great match. ZipRecruiter is so effective, in fact, that 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. With results like this, it's no wonder why ZipRecruiter is the highest rated hiring site in America. And right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. It's with a PH, not a V. ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A.
Going on, everybody. A good Tuesday afternoon to one and all. It's the 17th day of July, 2018. All-Star Night in Major League Baseball. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. once again. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776. You can tweet at me at Dan Graca, Graca, and a busy program once again. We will talk a little Major League Baseball at the break, trade scenarios, and we're going to get to something on Manny Machado as well, because it seems like it's only a matter of time now before Mr. Manny is going to be wearing a new uniform and maybe even playing in a new league. It might even be late tonight after that All-Star game goes final. So we'll talk to Tim Kurkjian, our very own baseball insider, coming up a little bit later on in the program. But I hope you guys had the opportunity to watch the Home Run Derby last night. But before we get into that, you know when a player doesn't like a contract, they hold out, right? Well, with Straight Talk Wireless, you never have to, because there is no contract, and they use the exact same 4G LTE towers as the big carriers, but for a lot less. Straight Talk Wireless, only at Walmart. Refer to terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com. Speaking of Straight Talk, it's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. As I was saying, I hope you had the opportunity to tune into the Home Run Derby last night, because, look, there was nothing going on in sports. This is kind of like a light time on the calendar. Baseball goes away for a few days, but, you know, it's a time to celebrate the first portion of the season. It's supposed to honor the best of what there was so far in this baseball season. And you knew that the Home Run Derby last night, look, I understand that it's an exhibition. I understand that it's a spectacle. Now, as a matter of preference, you may like All-Star Weekend better with the NBA. You may still get a kick out of the dunk contest and the three-point shootout and the skills competitions and whatnot that they do on the basketball side of things. You know, I think hockey does a nice job, and they've been very creative over the last several years in kind of rearranging the stuff that they do with the skills competitions and hardest shots and the goalie competitions and those type of things. You know, football really doesn't have that type of stuff at the Pro Bowl because, you know, when the Pro Bowl rolls around, we're kind of, all right, get me to the Super Bowl. You know, I guess they do some things now, but I don't really pay that any mind. But the Home Run Derby, whether you like it or not, it's very much an institution. And they've kind of fine-tuned things with the Derby over the last few years. Like now they have it bracket style, like it's a tournament. Instead of just, all right, we have 8 sluggers, and you take the 4 highest home run totals after the first round, they advance to round 2. They don't do that anymore. Now it's very much a head-to-head matchup. So they had the pairings. You knew who was going to go up against who. They also did away with the 10 outs. Now there's a clock, so it moves a little bit faster. It doesn't feel like you're there all night long. It's a much better pace to the way the Derby is constructed. And I got to be honest with you. If you like baseball and you are a baseball fan, you enjoyed yourself a lot last night watching that thing. At least I did. All right, that was good entertainment. It was good theater. And that's all you can ask for, especially while we're in the midst of our All-Star Week. And the guy with the target on his back, the guy under the microscope, if you will, was going to be Bryce Harper. The game was in his building, in his city. And he went out there last night and he put on a show. His dad was out there tossing BP to him, and he ends up winning the home run derby in walk-off fashion, besting Kyle Schwarber in the final round. But that's insignificant. What I took from that more than anything else was, last night was a good night if you're a fan of Major League Baseball. Last night was a good night for Washington, D.C. baseball. The place was packed. The local favorite was the star of the show, winning the home run derby. There was very little not to like with what took place last night at Nationals Ballpark. It was a win-win all around. And the powers that be with Major League Baseball, you know what? You couldn't have drawn it up any better. Because say what you want about Bryce Harper. And I know that he has not had the first half of the season that he would probably have wanted to, both individually and team-wise, with the Washington Nationals probably falling in the discussion of most disappointing team in baseball up until this point, middling around that 500 mark. And as I keep saying, they're stuck in neutral. They just can't seem to get it going. It's one step forward, two steps back. And Bryce Harper's performance individually has certainly not done a lot to help that. I know he's got a lot of home runs, but he's also got a heck of a lot of strikeouts. And he's not really hitting to an average, which you would accustom to a player that is certainly thought of as one of the best in Major League Baseball. And a guy who is probably going to be the most high-profile free agent that's going to hit the open market here coming up in the fall and the winter. And where is he going to go? And this has really been something that's gone back a couple of years. Ever since Scott Boras, his agent, has thrown these numbers out there of $300, $400 million for the player. That's a lot for anybody. Right? I mean, let's be real. It is a lot for anybody. And the natural thing to do is, the easy thing to do, is just to dump on a guy like Bryce Harper and say, well, you know, he's not a winner. Right? He hasn't won anything yet. Think about it. Since he's been up in the big leagues, the Washington Nationals have not even won a playoff series. And for a guy to get all of this attention and all the accolades and all the stars and the commercials and the merchandising, you would at least expect a performance with his team to go hand in hand with that. That hasn't happened. But if you know anything about baseball, that's also not fair. You can't pin it on just one guy. Mike Trout is even better than Bryce Harper. Okay, Mike Trout is the best player in the sport. How much postseason success has Mike Trout had as a member of the Angels? Next to none. Okay, even less than Bryce Harper. Made the postseason one time, and they were out of there in 5 minutes. Can't pin it all on one guy. Not in baseball. This isn't the NBA, where if LeBron James goes to your team, it's going to turn around your fortunes like that. Doesn't work that way with this game. But it's interesting, too, because I've read some things this morning, and certainly a lot of folks weighed in, and I do a show on MLB Network Radio and was on last night right after that home run derby and breaking it down and whatnot. And I really enjoyed what the show that baseball put on last night, specifically Bryce Harper. And you heard from him, and you heard the emotion in his voice. And yeah, I know a lot of that was on the field and it was kind of playing to the crowd, talking about how much he loves the fans and how electric an atmosphere it was. But even inside the tunnel and inside the media room there, where you have the press conference at the podium, you know, he was getting a little emotional, getting a little choked up, I think, given everything that happened in front of those fans last night. But maybe, just maybe, did he do enough last night in an exhibition? And I'm not throwing that out the window. We have to acknowledge that it's still an exhibition and it's a home run derby. But did he do enough last night to make other teams in Major League Baseball forget about the fact that he and his team have disappointed in the first half of the season, that he's only batting .214 on the year, and that why should I even consider giving this guy $300 million on the open market in the offseason? Is it really going to make that big of a difference for my franchise? I think that's a little much. I think it's a little much. You know, some people have insinuated that, whoa, you saw the attention that got last night. You saw how the place was packed. I'm sure that there's other owners in Major League Baseball or front office executives that were watching that last night and said, boy, Bryce Harper could put on our uniform and show up and play on our field each and every night. And they see dollar signs that the place is going to be packed on a night in, night out basis. I'm not going to go that far. Relax. Okay, what also fed into last night was the fact that it was in D.C. It was in his home. All right, if Bryce Harper went out there and put on a show and the home run derby was, let's say, in Petco Park in San Diego, I don't think that there would have been as much fanfare. There wouldn't have. And I also don't think that Bryce Harper would have even been in the home run derby because they had to twist his arm to do it because it was in D.C. Because way back at the beginning of the year, he went on record as saying, I'm not going to take part in the home run derby. I have nothing to gain for it. A lot of people think that it even hurts your swing and hurts your mechanics. And you never want something to kind of fall out of whack. Aaron Judge last year kind of insinuated that the shoulder issues that bothered him in the second half of the season maybe were exacerbated a little bit by what happened in the home run derby, which he won down there at Marlins Park. But this is a special player, and he's a special talent, and he's going to be a rich man in the offseason. The question is where? For the longest time, he just kind of assumed that he was going to play himself out of D.C. and that the Nationals weren't going to be able to afford him because this is a guy that was going to command, $200, $300 million. Maybe it was going to be too rich for Washington's blood. And you were going to have to look at the usual suspects, the ones that write the big money checks, whether it would be the Yankees, whether it would be the Dodgers, the Cubs, the Red Sox, the teams that spend generously on a year-in, year-out basis. Teams like that. Who would realistically be able to afford this guy? But it wasn't going to be Washington. But when you look at how he's played so far this year, and again, he's a talented player. The guy gets on base, but I still think big picture, he's underachieved. All right, for somebody who's supposed to be, one of the shining lights of this sport, batting .214, you got to give me something better than that. All right, you remember that slugger? I tweet about it a lot. Remember Adam Dunn? Played with the Reds, played with the White Sox, among others, the Nationals. Adam Dunn was a guy who would hit you, 30, 40 home runs a year, sometimes more. But he would strike out a ton and he would bat .220. Would anybody think about giving Adam Dunn $300 million a year or a $300 million contract? Of course not. So Bryce Harper's going to have to pick it up in that sense. Is the fact that free agency is looming, is that something that's possibly weighing him down this year? And is that one of the reasons why he's kind of had a tough go of things? Maybe. And he's expressed some of that frustration. Over the weekend when they were playing the Mets at Citi Field, he failed to run out a hard-hit ground ball. Maybe it's wearing on him a little bit. And especially this week here in D.C. when he was going to be the star of the show and he was going to have to show up at events all over the place and have to answer question after question after question. Yeah, maybe. He is a human being. But it's a bottom-line business as well. And you're expected to go out there and produce and perform. And then you get rewarded because of that. But you also allow yourself last night to look at the state of the game and look at where Major League Baseball is at. Now, let me throw it out there. Okay, just so we're not holding back anything. I'm a baseball fan. I'm a diehard baseball fan. I told you I do shows on MLB Network Radio. Love the game. Love talking the ins and outs of the game. Appreciate all the franchises in the sport. Not ones just in my own backyard. Love it. Okay? Can't get enough of it. So this stings when we have a few nights of not having real legitimate baseball. But when you look at the overall health of the game, it's different from where it was even when I was a kid. And I'm not talking about, 50, 60 years ago. Not that old. Wasn't that long ago. But as a kid, you played baseball. As a kid, you went out there in the summertime, got a couple of buddies. You had a glove, you had a ball, you had a bat. You played stickball even, right? Baseball was it in the summertime, more so than the other sports. Doesn't seem like that's happening as much anymore, right? Doesn't seem like it. How do you get the younger fans in the game? It's something that baseball and Commissioner Rob Manfred had gone on record speaking about many, many, many times. How do we grow the game? How do we make it more appealing to the young fan base again? Right? How do we get that to happen? And far too often I talk to kids nowadays and, we talk about sports and you talk about, what do you prefer? What do you like? Who are some of your favorite players? Baseball doesn't come up that often. Clearly the NFL is the most popular sport in our country. And I think behind it, the NBA has kind of grown leaps and bounds. And the NBA has probably leapfrogged even Major League Baseball. Everybody knows who LeBron James is. Everybody knows who Kevin Durant is. Steph Curry. I just named you 3 of the top players in the NBA. Household names. Can you say the same thing about the top 3 names in Major League Baseball, whoever you deem those players to be? Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, and pick a third guy. Whoever you think that is. Right now, Max Scherzer is the best pitcher in baseball. Do you think most kids know who Max Scherzer is? And this is no knock on him. Guy's a great pitcher. But do you think that they know who Max Scherzer is? You know, the one kid who maybe is out there playing baseball in the schoolyard or whatnot, you think he's standing on that mound trying to be the next Max Scherzer? I don't know. I don't know. Because things have changed. And more often than not, you're going to see more kids probably out on the basketball court trying to be the next LeBron, trying to be the next Steph Curry, than they are trying to be the next Max Scherzer or Bryce Harper or Manny Machado or Aaron Judge or whoever. But if you follow the game, if you're entrenched in the game, if you love this game like I do, it's in a really, really, really good place. Really good place. They always say money talks, right? That's the bottom line. 2017, baseball had record revenues. Record. North of $10 billion in annual revenue. That's healthy. All right, that is a healthy bottom line if you ask me. And if you're not part of the game yet, if you're not following suit, if you're not watching this game religiously and just maybe checking in and out, I don't know what to tell you, except you're missing out. Now, I know that baseball inherently has a challenge more so than these other sports do, right? They play more games. That's number one. So it's really impossible. I mean, look, in life you have other responsibilities. You have other duties. You have family. You have job responsibilities. You know, you have life. You have things that pop up. It is really difficult to devote 6 months out of the year, day in and day out, and make sure that you're locked in for 162 games. It's a lot. Football, on the other hand, you play 16. It's once a week. That's the beauty of it. And in most cases, it's on a Sunday. So you know when the game's coming on. Boom, I can give you 3-4 hours a week. That's not too much. You know, even the other sports, basketball, for example, hockey, you play 82 games. All right, you don't have to watch each and every one, but, you know, you kind of pop in and check in what you want to check in on. See when the big matchups are. See when LeBron is taking on the Golden State Warriors. You know, that's one that I'm going to circle. I got to see that game. Hard to do that in baseball. It's hard. You know, first of all, whenever you want to see like a top pitcher go up against one of the top sluggers in baseball, when those teams meet on the schedule, well, how do you know that that pitcher is even going to be lined up to face that team the 3 days while they're in town? Sometimes it doesn't happen. So you can't even plan it out that far in advance. Things that baseball has to work around. You know, there aren't as many programs talking baseball. You know, even with national media, even here with ESPN, let's be frank, right? Let's just tell it like it is. You got daily NFL shows. You got daily NBA shows. You don't have a lot of daily MLB shows. National media. And that's a problem a little bit. You know, there's room for that. You can grow this game. And you can't sit here and tell me that nobody watches, nobody cares, because that's just ignorant, and you're wrong. $10 billion a year in revenue. Game is in a good place. Put on the TV and tell me what happened last night in Nationals Park, that this game is not in a good place. It's in a really good place right now. Can they do a better job of marketing their stars? Yes. Guilty as charged. Absolutely they can. You know, last night, for example, in the home run derby, you want to find a flaw in it? You want to find a fault? I mean, let's just go right now that the top sluggers in the game weren't even in the home run derby. Right? I mean, Bryce Harper, yeah, he's the local guy. Like I said, they had to twist his arm to make sure that he was going to be able to take part in it. But some of these other names, I mean, Alex Bregman probably isn't even in the biggest slugger even in the Houston Astros lineup. Right? Javi Baez. Javi Baez is a really good player, but I don't think of him as one of the best power hitters in Major League Baseball. Max Muncy, who's had a Cinderella season for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Guy was like out of baseball and has come out of nowhere to be a vital cog on that baseball team. Most people couldn't pick Max Muncy out of a lineup. You know, but the Aaron Judges of the world, the Giancarlo Stantons, J.D. Martinez, I'm just talking about the guys who have hit the most home runs this year. You know, the big sluggers in 2018. They were nowhere to be found in that home run derby. Mike Trout wasn't in the home run derby. Jose Ramirez wasn't in the home run derby. But it is an exhibition, and I get it. But it is good to see that most of the best players in this sport, they're going to be around later tonight for this All-Star game. And it is going to be baseball's best. And by the way, I'll tell you something else. I also like the fact that they did away with the All-Star game being the condition for home field advantage in the World Series. I thought that was ridiculous. It's an exhibition game, tried and true. Always has been, always will be. You can't force more people to watch if it's going to mean something, supposedly, because you have to go all in. And one of the problems I had with baseball in what they did when allowing the All-Star game to mean home field advantage for the World Series is that they still let the fans have too big of an input in it. Right? If the game counts, if the game means something, then you got to do away with the fans voting for the starters. Because in one breath, you can't say that it's a game for the fans, which it is. But then in the next sentence, you say, oh no, but it means home field advantage for the All-Star game or for the World Series. You can't have it hand in hand. Now it's an exhibition. You allow the fans to vote, even if they don't necessarily get it right. And it's still a popularity contest at the end of the day. I understand all those things. But that's the way it should be. And when you look at a guy like Bryce Harper and his free agency looming at the end of this season, you take a guy like Manny Machado, and as we wait here to find out where he's going to call home again when the second half of the season resumes at the later part of this week. You know, like I said, chances are you might hear something as early as tonight, because they put the moratorium down that they don't want any trades announced or any sort of big moves made during the All-Star festivities. But there have been guys traded as soon as that All-Star game goes final in the past, and I would expect the same thing to happen to Manny Machado. At the very latest, you're going to hear something by tomorrow that the Baltimore Orioles have moved on from Manny Machado. But he's another guy that's going to be a free agent at the end of the season. As big a rental player as we've seen come along in several years, right? Because good luck trying to re-sign this guy, whoever trades for him. So you're going to have to give up a bounty to get him off Baltimore's hands, and then you're also going to have to go into the offseason saying, boy, I hope we have just as good a shot as some of these other teams to be able to retain his services because he's a hell of a player. And certainly Manny Machado, he is on a god-awful baseball team with the Baltimore Orioles. They have had as bad a season as you could possibly have. They're well on their way to losing over 100 games, and he's probably thrilled that he's getting the heck out of that situation. But he hasn't allowed all that stuff and all that noise to affect his play. And whatever team he ends up with, whether it's the Dodgers, whether it's the Phillies, whether it's Milwaukee, it sounds like he's going someplace in the National League. I don't think that that's going to bother him either. He wants to be a shortstop, though. You know what? Tell the teams that are courting you in free agency you want to be a shortstop. But for right now, if I'm Manny Machado and I want to go someplace and be part of a winner and try to make a run at getting a World Series ring going into free agency, I'll tell him, you know what? You want me to play short, play third, I'll play anywhere. Just want to help the team win. Because chances are, wherever he gets traded to, he's only going to be a member of that team for the next 2.5 months. And then it's open season for his services in free agency. Tim Kurkjian will join me a little bit later on in the program, talk a little bit about all the things we just discussed and what we could expect to see in the second half of the season here with Major League Baseball. But I want to hear from you. What's baseball's relationship in your life as a sports fan right now? 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. That was Straight Talk Wireless. Nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. We'll also have more on the Le'Veon Bell situation with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We talked about it a lot yesterday. We now have resolution. No long-term deal. Going to play under the franchise tag again. And his agent basically came out yesterday and said, you know what? Chances are this is going to be Le'Veon's last year wearing the black and gold. What does that mean only for him, for Pittsburgh, and maybe some of these other teams around the rest of the National Football League? Lot to get to here on a busy Tuesday afternoon. And you can check things all the time, like your email or social media. But Discover asks, what about checking something as important as your credit score? Well, Discover makes it quick and easy with their credit scorecard, which is free for everyone, even if you're not a customer. See your FICO credit score and other important credit information. And once you know your score, you should check to see if your current credit is the best fit for you. Learn more at discover.com/credit scorecard. Limitations apply. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. We'll get it rolling here on ESPN Radio right after this.
Allie's mom knew she had a strong kick even back in the womb. And from then on, Allie was always kicking a ball and saying she was going to play pro soccer. And one day, while she was kicking a ball against a wall, her skills drew even more attention. Her boss said, "Could you please stop that and get me those quarterly numbers I asked for?" Turns out Allie just wasn't that good a talker. But she was a good accountant. That's why she switched to Geico. She knew they could save her a bunch of money on car insurance. And she sure wasn't ever going to make that pro soccer money. No, sir.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Don't miss Amazon Prime Day. There's still time to find amazing deals. It ends tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, now that it's warming up, very warm, it's time to get out to the stadium and catch a few ball games, or take your lady to a show or her favorite concert. She'll love it. The official ticket partner of ESPN has you covered. Go to vividseats.com/ESPN for your exclusive discount offer. Stephen A. out, Dan Graca sitting in for him here once again on ESPN Radio. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776. Talking baseball with you. Tim Kurkjian of ESPN will join us coming up at the top of the hour to weigh in on the state of the game at the All-Star break. And as always, feel free to tweet away at Dan Graca, Graca. Let's get to the busy phones here. Let's say hi to Tom in Illinois. Tom, you're going to be our leadoff hitter today. How are you?
If I was doing any better, I need a twin, but I don't know if anyone else really wants two of me running around. So
that's
we'll
very
take it
deep.
as it is.
Yes.
Well, you were talking about where's like kind of baseball stand in, your own packing order, and I might be the exception or the outlier. Baseball is still my number one sport. I'd say basketball, probably NCAA, NBA. Second and third, and NFL coming in at fourth. But, my first pro event was a baseball game. It was Cubs-Cardinals. My dad was a Cubs fan. My mom always went against my dad, so she was a Cardinals fan that night. I went Cubs. My brother went Cardinals. That's just a memory that's forever in my mind. So I've always just kind of gravitated towards baseball and all the essence and love behind it. But, I think they do need to make a couple tweaks to always be relevant and maybe let go of some of those traditions that make, sense to adjust.
Well, when you say, Tom, you say traditions, that's another thing that I haven't gotten to yet. If baseball's guilty of anything, you could point the finger at them and say the unwritten rule is something you hear way too frequently. It's something that bogs down the game, I think, way too frequently. And baseball has a laundry list of these unwritten rules, which is kind of insane because, if they're unwritten rules, why are there so many of them, right? I mean, you would think that everybody would know them well if they were supposed to be followed out in suit, as opposed to how you're supposed to respect the game and you're not supposed to see, Bryce Harper, give him credit for one thing, Tom, and I thank you for checking in today. Bryce Harper's a guy who has spoken about many, many, many times about how the game needs to be more fun. When I'm out on the field, I'm going to show emotion. I'm going to play hard. The helmet and the hat come flying off his head and you see that long hair blowing around. He likes playing the game that way. Rough, hard-nosed, old school, showing a little bit of fire. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's 2018. What is this supposed to be? You hit a home run, you hit a game-winning home run, you're not supposed to be excited. What are you supposed to do? Tip your cap to the pitcher and trot around the bases with your head down? And then, God forbid, here's one of these unwritten rules again. If a player is going to show any sort of emotion, the next time he comes up to the plate, that you got to throw one up and in on him or throw one behind him to send a message like, hey, it's not good to show that much emotion on the field? How about going out there and getting him? If you want him to pipe down, if you want him not to be as celebratory, how about going and getting him out? How about that? You ever think of that one? Go make a pitch next time. Kevin in the Bronx, you're on ESPN Radio. What's up, Kev?
Hey, I'm glad someone's talking baseball. It's my favorite sport. It's my favorite sport to play. It's my favorite sport to watch. I played all three sports at a pretty high level, played in the minor leagues in baseball, and I still love it. But there's some things about baseball that have promulgated, there's some things that they've stopped that have made it difficult. Mm-hmm. When they stop bunting, when they stop stealing bases, I don't like interleague anymore. That's lost its it doesn't do nothing for me, which makes the All-Star game, which I used to look forward to seeing every year, very milquetoast for me, and even the World Series. The fact that, you can't argue with umpires anymore. Baseball is the only sport that you can argue. Now you just say peep and you're out of the game.
Right.
I look forward to somebody being nose to nose with the umpire, and they've taken the edge out of it. The reality is that baseball on its own is a great game. But, yes, they don't market the players. And you're talking about, I love the fact that you talked about that, of throwing inside. Listen, throwing inside, breaking up a double play, running over the catcher, it's taking the balls out of the baseball. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. You're throwing inside, and you say they didn't show emotion. Listen, Willie Mays, Jackie Robinson, Maury Wills, Lou Brock, Reggie Jackson, Pete Rose, all these great players all showed emotion, and they all played with another edge, and there was nothing wrong with it. I'll never forget seeing Reggie Jackson get knocked down 3 times and won it back. 3 times.
Right.
All right, and the 4th time when he got up, he hit the ball into the black in the old Yankee Stadium. And when he touched home plate, he went right after the pitcher. That kind of stuff. I love that kind of stuff.
I think that's something, and Kevin, you're spot on with that, and I think that's something that's been missing for the game. You're starting to see it in spurts, but I think it's something that needs to be injected a little bit more prominently, and I thank you for the call. I want to hit on a couple of things that you just pointed out here, okay, because I think that they're good points, they're valid points. You mentioned bunting, the absence of bunting. All right, I don't think that that's anything, in terms of the way baseball is being taught, for example. I think it's more just about an issue with the fundamentals. There are guys who are in the major leagues. I mean, if you watch the game, the guys can't bunt. Guys can't bunt at all. I mean, I learned how to bunt when I was in Little League. Little League, 8, 9 years old, you learn how to bunt. How are guys in the major leagues, the highest level of baseball, and they can't drop down a bunt? Fact. It's a fact. The shift has certainly been something now, which has thrown a wrench into the game. A lot of people are anti-shift. It's taken away the game. A lot of base hits that ordinarily would get through the hole and get down for a hit now are getting gobbled up because of the shift. Hey, the shift has been around forever. Maybe not to the extent that it is right now, but, even when you go as far back as to when they would just position outfielders, a certain few steps to the right or a few steps to the left, in a way, that's a shift. It's strategy. It's doing your homework, and in this day and age where analytics kind of reign supreme and you have all these advances in technology which allow you to go out and optimize scouting to the highest degree, why wouldn't you do something like that, right? Why wouldn't you? You think about the National Football League, for example. When you're watching a team on defense, do the 11 guys line up in the same spot each and every play? Are they mandated to line up in the same spot? They can't move? Of course not. You're moving around and you're trying to get set up as best as possible to where you're going to be able to make a stop and make a play. The other thing I want to hit on is what something Kevin mentioned about interleague play. And I got some information for you about how that might be something that is going to fall by the wayside here sooner rather than later. But before you hit the road for any vacation this summer, do me a favor and visit GNC. You need to stay healthy, and GNC is the highest quality solutions and supplements in the industry. GNC brand products pass up to 150 quality checks. You can be sure you're getting the best prices with GNC's price match guarantee. GNC doesn't just match prices, they'll beat them by $1. Or try something new. If it's not right for you, return it for a full refund. You heard right, a full refund. This summer, live well with GNC. Exclusions apply. See an associate or GNC.com for details. Dan Graca is sitting in for Stephen A. It's ESPN Radio.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Dan Graca in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio. And we're presented by Progressive Home Insurance. Getting a quote is easier than ever. And why don't you also surprise a friend or loved one today with a bouquet from 1-800-Flowers.com. When you order a dozen multicolored roses for only $29.99, you'll get another dozen absolutely free. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. One of the other callers brought up interleague play and how it's kind of wearing old pretty quickly here. Not even pretty quickly. Remember, interleague play started in 1997. So we're already at the 2-decade mark of interleague. And I would kind of agree with that. It's not something that I really look forward to. But the way the game is situated right now, you have 30 teams. You have 15 in each league. So you have an odd number of teams in each league, which means every single day on the baseball calendar, you are going to have at least one series that's interleague. And you don't even look at it much as interleague anymore. You kind of just look at it as any other regular series because we've kind of grown accustomed to it. But would I like to see it go back to even number of teams in each league and to do away with the interleague games? Yeah, I would. I really and truthfully would. And I'll tell you why. First of all, Rob Manfred, who's made the rounds over the last couple of days at the All-Star festivities in D.C., one of the things that he said was, in a sit-down interview that he did, was that before he leaves the game as commissioner, he believes that they will go to 32 teams. 32 teams, and you're looking at maybe 4 teams in each division. When you get to the 16 in each league, you'll have 4 divisions in each league with 4 teams, like the NFL has. That would probably do away with interleague play, at least on a daily basis. It would. Not probably would. It definitely would. Which I'm okay with. And, you even look at something as small as the All-Star game. The fact that we have interleague play, I think personally, and you can tell me if you feel any differently, me personally, I think interleague play has detracted away from the enjoyment of the World Series. The novelty that the World Series is. Growing up, before there was interleague play, you really looked forward to seeing 2 teams step out on the field against one another that you had never seen play one another before. Because it wasn't in the cards when there was not interleague play. It even made the All-Star game a little bit more special because you had players from one league taking on players from the other who had never faced each other before unless it was in a World Series. I don't know if they would ever do away with it. I know that there's some series that maybe hold a little bit of extra weight. The Subway Series in New York with the Mets and the Yankees, Cubs and White Sox, maybe Dodgers, Angels, Giants, A's, series like that. But the rest of them, I think that we can kind of just do without. Don't you? Do you really get all jazzed up when you see the Mariners playing the Rockies? Or the Rangers playing the Padres? Is that something that you make as appointment viewing as a baseball fan? Oh, I have to watch that game? I have to? The answer is no. I would rather see my team play the teams in my division or the teams even in the same league more than just a couple of times a year. Because the way things are situated right now, your opponents in your league outside of your own division, you play them once at home and once on the road. That's it. So if you're a fan and you look forward to when that team comes into town, whether it's they got some good players that you want to see, whether just the lure of the franchise, for example, you get one shot to see them and then that's it. They're in for 3 days and then they're out of town. Goodbye, we'll see you again next year. They're like a traveling rock show. So if the St. Louis Cardinals, and the St. Louis Cardinals have a national fan base, St. Louis Cardinals are taking on a team who's in the NL East or the NL West, and they only go into town once a year. If they play like in the first couple of weeks of the season in that city, that's it. You're done. You don't see them again. I think that's missing something here from the game. You need that. Enough with the interleague stuff. So at least if you have this expansion, and I don't know where the teams are going to be. Montreal seems to be a city that is rumored to maybe get back into things, but I know that they have to get some help up there with the infrastructure and building a stadium. You're not going to put them back in Olympic Stadium again. Things are going to have to change in that regard. But adding another team in Canada is not the worst thing in the world. At least I don't think so. Maurice in New Jersey. Maurice, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
How you doing, Dan?
Good, Maurice. What's up?
All right, well, baseball has meant a lot to me since I was a little child. When I saw Derek Jeter hit a walk-off hit, and I think it was great. But besides the point, what I'm trying to say is that when you have big market teams that can sell out games like the Red Sox, but when you have Florida, Marlins are not even getting 12,000 people in their stadium to come watch their team play. I really don't know what they can do to try to get more people into the city to help watch the games. I want to know what you think they can do to try to help and rebuild the game, make it better.
Well, you're not going to – here's the thing, Maurice, and I thank you for the phone call. You're not going to get a full house each and every day. You're just not. First of all, you have a lot of product that you're out there trying to sell. It goes back to supply and demand. You play 81 home games. That's 81 dates. That is a lot of tickets you're trying to sell. And if your team isn't any good, that's going to be the first pitfall that you face, that nobody wants to go watch a bad team. Second of all, these stadiums are 40, 50,000 people. I mean, there's not going to be that many people who are, number one, going to have the ability to go watch a baseball game in person and everything that comes with it on a night-in, night-out basis during the regular season. And if you only have a handful of those matchups that are going to be worth selling out the ballpark for, you better hope you fatten up on when those teams come to town, if they come to town. Tim Kurkjian, we'll talk some baseball next with him. It's Dan Graca in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Hiring is challenging, but there's one place you can go where hiring is simple, fast, and smart. A place where growing businesses connect to qualified candidates. That place is ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. ZipRecruiter sends your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards. But they don't stop there. With their powerful matching technology, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and invite them to apply to your job. As applications come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one and spotlights the top candidates so you never miss a great match. ZipRecruiter is so effective, in fact, that 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. With results like this, it's no wonder why ZipRecruiter is the highest rated hiring site in America. And right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. It's with a PH, not a V. ZipRecruiter.com/Stephen A. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A.
Welcome back on this Tuesday afternoon. Dan Graca is sitting in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio. Tonight, of course, All-Star Night in the nation's capital. So join Aaron Judge, Jose Altuve, and the rest of the AL superstars. They take on Freddie Freeman, Nolan Arenado, Bryce Harper, and the NL Stars, presented by Indeed. And coverage of the 2018 MLB All-Star Game begins tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN Radio, ESPNRadio.com, and the ESPN app. And one of the gentlemen who will be part of our coverage tonight on ESPN Radio is the outstanding Tim Kurkjian, who's nice enough to give us a couple of minutes here before the game. Tim, it's Dan Graca. Happy All-Star Day. How are you?
I'm great, Dan. It's hard to not be happy at the All-Star Game. And coming off a really interesting home run derby, we've had a great week so far. Now we just got to finish with a really good All-Star Game, which I'm pretty sure we'll get.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. And I spent much of the first hour of our show talking about how much fun last night was and really the show that Major League Baseball put on, of course, led by Bryce Harper, the local favorite there. But I would have to think, Tim, that pales in comparison to maybe the show that was put on in the celebrity softball game by one Tim Kurkjian, no?
No, well, thank you. I'm just glad I'm still walking today. I'm 61. I'm 5'4". It's a really bad combination of things, but I had a great time. I got forced into doing this. I didn't want to do it, but my boss said, "You're doing it." And some of the people that I met were just great. I played next to a couple of Hall of Famers, and of course, I met Jamie Foxx and Shaquille O'Neal. All these guys I'd never met before. So that was a really fun night for me. I wasn't thinking it would be, but it was, and thank goodness I didn't make a fool of myself either.
No, it's definitely cool. Now, was that the first time, even though it was softball, that you got to play some type of baseball on a major league field before?
No, I've done this before. We when I used to cover the Orioles, somehow miraculously we played a game at Memorial Stadium, and we played a media game at Camden Yards. So I have played, I don't want to say a real baseball game, but it was baseball, not softball, at both Memorial Stadium and Camden Yards. And even though it was ridiculous because there was a bunch of media people, it was tremendous fun being out there, and it just gives you just another idea of how big a big league field is. And it was a really great experience then, too.
Absolutely, and I'm sure it never gets old. And what didn't get old last night, at least for those folks in D.C., was the local favorite Bryce Harper hitting all those home runs and then winning the home run derby in walk-off style there. beating Kyle Schwarber in the final. It's interesting because, the Nationals have had an up-and-down season, as everybody knows. Harper certainly individually hasn't had the year that he would probably have liked to have, but there was genuine emotion that he showed last night, both addressing the crowd on the field and then in the press conference afterwards. Where do you think things stand right now if you were going to put it in terms of odds of him returning to D.C. next year and re-signing with the Nats?
I still don't think the odds are in favor of the Nationals, Dan, but as crazy and as ridiculous as it might sound, last night I think moved him a little closer to re-signing with the Nationals. I still think it's unlikely because so many other teams or several other teams will be involved. But I think that was genuine last night. I think that was real, not just from Bryce to the fans, but the fans to him. And he has a great sense of history, and it's possible, still an outside chance, that he looks and says, this is the team that drafted me. I have a chance to be the greatest position player ever to play in the city of Washington. I can set my own course here rather than, say, going to the Dodgers or the Cubs or the Yankees or wherever it is and getting in line there. I can be at the front of the line here for many more years to come. And again, I still think it's unlikely, but I think last night was at least an indicator that maybe some momentum gathered for Harper staying in Washington.
Fair enough. Let's tackle it from this standpoint then. Obviously, you look at his numbers. I know that he walks a lot. The on-base percentage is good, but he strikes out a ton. The batting average is down in around 215. He's got a lot of home runs, but do you think his performance individually has maybe brought down that $300 million price tag that Scott Boras spoke openly about a couple of years ago to where maybe the Nationals could be players for retaining his services if they don't have to write that big of a check?
Well, that's certainly possible. I don't think there's any doubt that he's lost some money with the way his team has played and the way that he has played for the last month and a half. But he is ready, I'm certain, to get really hot here. And if he carries this team into the playoffs, again, I think that's unlikely at the moment with the struggles they've had. But if he has a great second half, I think that price starts to go up again. But yes, I think the more the price comes down, the more the Nationals feel like at least they have a chance to keep him.
All right, let's talk about the ball club here, because I think that if you're going to compile a list of teams that have been disappointing in the first half of this season, even though we're a little bit more the halfway point, of course, I think the Nationals certainly are at or near the top of that list. They're kind of stuck in neutral all year. They went out and made that move for Kelvin Herrera to add depth to the bullpen, but do you expect Mike Rizzo to be more active as we approach the deadline to see if he can jumpstart this team to get back to the top of this division?
Yes, he's going to look around, and he's got to improve their starting pitching because really since June the 1st, the National starting pitching has been just about as bad as any team in the major leagues, which just doesn't follow. So the first thing that has to happen, they have to get Steven Strasburg and Ryan Zimmerman back after the break. They have to get healthy for the first time all year, the team, and then they have to hope that Daniel Murphy and Adam Eaton, who are, I think, limping around. They're not 100% by any means. They just have to start to play as well as guys can play when they're not 100%, and that's the best way for this team to take off. The Braves and the Phillies are really good stories playing with great energy, but at the same time, the Nationals have a lot of work to do here in order to get back to where they need to be.
Manny Machado, of course, the big name that's been swirling about there in D.C. because you got to figure that he's going to be traded sooner rather than later. It might even be announced tonight as soon as that game goes final. They just don't want anything, of course, to interfere with the festivities and everything. Sounds like a National League team. Where do you think he ends up?
Dan, that's a great question. I think in the last 4 days we've had three really good reporters, one saying the Brewers, then saying the Phillies, then saying the Dodgers. This is really tough stuff. I think he's going to one of those three teams. This morning I made a guess. We're all guessing at this point that the Phillies seem to make the most sense, but the Dodgers really need a shortstop. The Brewers really need a shortstop. So that makes an awful lot of sense. To all three of them make all the sense in the world, and he is so good. He could turn a contender into a champion, and that's why the National League, the fortunes of the entire league, could change based on where Manny Machado is traded.
Now, we know that he wants to be a shortstop. He's made that very clear. But it's one thing to tell teams in free agency when he does the whip around that, yeah, I want to be a shortstop, and then they can certainly give in to his wishes. But now when you talk about him being traded, do you think that he would maybe say, all right, even if it's a club that's well entrenched to the shortstop position, I don't mind kicking back to third if it means maybe trying to win a ring here over the next couple months?
Right. There's no doubt in my mind, at least, that he will not hold up a trade to a team that can go to the World Series by saying, I have to be a shortstop. Then maybe he'll say, all right, I'll play third base for 2 months, but I'm a shortstop after this. But let's just say he goes to the Dodgers. Mm-hmm. I think him being the smart guy that he is, the Dodgers say, all right, we're going to acquire you. You're going to play shortstop for 2 months, and then next year and the years after, we're going to sign you for a ton of money. I'm not sure how much, but it's going to be a ton. And then you're going to play third base because Corey Seager's going to play shortstop, and we can take Justin Turner and move him to second base, and that's how we're going to win several pennants. I can't believe Manny Machado wouldn't at least look at that. I understand he wants to be a shortstop, but if you get a chance to make all that money and play on a team that's going to contend every year, there's no crime in becoming a third baseman again.
Dan Graca in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio. We're talking baseball with Tim Kurkjian, and the Stephen A. Smith Show is brought to you by Discover. Get your free credit scorecard today, even if you're not a Discover customer. It includes your FICO credit score, and checking your scorecard won't hurt your credit. Learn more at discover.com/credit scorecard. Limitations apply. If Tim Kurkjian was running a baseball team, and this was like Monopoly money, and there were no limitations to the spending, who are you, all things being equal, who are you writing the bigger check for this offseason, Manny Machado or Bryce Harper?
Boy, that's a great question. I think I would still go with Bryce Harper, even though Manny Machado plays potentially a premium defensive position at shortstop. If you can get that kind of production out of a shortstop, I think you have to strongly consider that. But I just have this feeling about Harper, and I got that feeling again last night, that even though he gets himself in trouble once in a while, charging the mound or whatever, and sometimes he's just so intense he works against himself. But watching him last night, to me, that's just a franchise player. So by the thinnest of hairs, I think I would take Harper over Machado, but obviously I'd take either one of those and be thrilled.
And who do you think would net you more in return in terms of marketing, merchandising? Would you give Harper the edge there over Machado as well?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, because I think he likes being out in front. I think he's comfortable being out in front. And the big lights, I know, do not bother Manny Machado, but I think they bother Bryce Harper even less. So that would make all the sense in the world, that you would just hit him third every game, but you would also say, and you're going to be the face of this franchise, and I don't think there would be anything wrong with that.
Jacob deGrom is another name who's certainly pretty prominent at these All-Star festivities. He's pitched as well as anybody in baseball this year, and his name has been floated out in trade rumors by the Mets, given how disappointing they've been this year. And then yesterday, his agent, Brodie Van Wagenen, decides to tell everybody that, if the Mets aren't going to sign Jacob deGrom long-term, even though they have him under control for 2 more seasons, they might as well go ahead and trade him. What do you think the resolution is going to be with this situation with deGrom and the Mets?
Well, again, you ask a lot of hard questions here, Dan.
That's what I'm here for, Tim, but you're the answer man.
This is a difficult time right now. I'm going to say that the Mets, knowing if they're ever going to contend anytime soon, Jacob deGrom and Noah Syndergaard need to be healthy and at the top of the rotation, and therefore I don't think they're going to trade him. I think they're going to sign him long-term. I think they should sign him long-term. He's only getting better. He's got a 1.68 ERA. And even though you can redirect this franchise pretty darn well by trading your best pitcher, it just doesn't make sense to me in a lot of ways. So I think they'll keep him and sign him long-term, because he told us again yesterday on Baseball Tonight, I'd like to stay with the Mets, but he's not going to stay there if the team keeps losing, and they're not going to offer him an extension.
And the other thing that complicates matters from the Mets standpoint, and I guess in turn deGrom, is that they need to first figure out who's going to be calling the shots in the baseball department. With Sandy Alderson stepping down, they're going to probably go outside the organization to interview some candidates, and that's probably not something that's going to be resolved until later on in the offseason.
Right. And, of course, that complicates it even more. And what further complicates it, or maybe makes it easier, is that this is a New York team. And across town, it's a really popular New York team. The Mets just are not in a position to say, yeah, we're going to rebuild now. I mean, the Royals can do that, and other teams can do that. But the Mets have a hard time doing that, and that's another reason I think they're going to keep DeGrom. But you're right. They got to figure out if they're going to trade him or make any moves, who's going to be the guy making those decisions.
Certainly. We're talking baseball with Tim Kurkjian, of course, here on ESPN Radio. I was caught by surprise late Saturday night when the word came down from the Cardinals that they were dismissing Mike Matheny. With 1 day left before the All-Star break begins. I thought the timing was a little odd there. And, we've read all the stories about maybe some dysfunction in the clubhouse, and forget about the on-field performance of the baseball team. Number one, were you caught off guard that took place? Number two, do you think that a Joe Girardi, for example, is going to be the eventual manager in waiting for them?
Well, that would first off, I was a little surprised that they made that move because they're the Cardinals,
right,
and they usually don't fire their manager in the middle of a baseball season. But the bottom line is this team is really just a little bit over 500. Their roster construction is not particularly good, and I'm not sure you can blame that on the manager. But I know in St. Louis these days, people are getting really antsy there. I mean, this will likely be 3 years in a row without making the playoffs, and that's just too long if you're a Cardinal fan. So they're a little bit irritable and impatient there, which is unlike great Cardinal fans, and that just shows you maybe a move was to be made. And as much as I really like Mike Matheny and think he did a really good job overall, he's wound a little tight, which is the way that Joe Girardi is, and the new manager of today, Aaron Boone, Alex Cora, A.J. Hinch, those guys aren't wound very tight. But at the same time, Joe Girardi did a sensational job in 10 years in New York, and I think he can almost pick the next place he wants to go. And if he really wants to go to St. Louis, my guess would be he would be really high on that list.
Speaking of Girardi's old team, the Yankees, they're entrenched in a pretty good race there in the American League East, and I understand that the wild card gives you more of an incentive to want to win your division because you don't want your postseason livelihood to come down to just 9 innings, but unfortunately that's going to happen to one of these teams here who are going to probably win well over 100 games, the both of them. Right now, if you were going to handicap the AL East race, do you like the Red Sox more or do you like this Yankees team more, even though you expect a move to be made by one, if not both of them?
Yeah, for the moment, I like the Red Sox more. I like their starting pitching a little more, even though the Yankees offense is just so destructive. That Boston offense is really good, too. The Yankee bullpen is better, certainly. But I think it all comes down to, do the Yankees somehow find a way to come up with a number 2 starter? And I'm sorry, I don't see that guy out there at the moment. Jay Happ is a very useful guy who could really help the Yankees down the stretch. But is he the kind of guy that can match up with the number 2 starter with the Astros, say Garrett Cole, in the postseason? I'm not sure about that, and that's what the Yankees are looking for, and that's why this is a very, very important time. Who is Brian Cashman going to come up with? He's got the money and all the resources and all the prospects to make a deal. So let's see what he does, and then that could change who's the best team in this division.
The American League as a whole, Tim, is certainly a lot more top-heavy than the National League. You can make a legitimate argument right now. The 5 teams that are going to be part of the postseason in the AL are already kind of known, right? Red Sox, Yankees, Indians, Astros. And if you believe maybe that the Oakland A's could keep this going, maybe they put a dent in the Seattle Mariners. But other than that, it looks like the AL is pretty much decided for at least as far as October is concerned.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how this works out because most years we have no idea who's going to be in October in the middle of July. But I think we do know pretty much how the American League is going to look. But the beauty of the National League is we don't know. I do these power rankings every week at ESPN, and I probably have a best team in the National League, a different team like every week because the things change. Like right now, maybe the Cubs are the best team in the National League, or maybe it was the Dodgers last week, and before that it was the Phillies or the Braves or the Brewers, and that's why this league is so far up in the air because so many of those teams are so evenly matched. They're all pretty good, but I don't think any of those teams in the National League is so great right now that they're going to run away from everybody else.
All right, Tim, I know I've asked you some tough questions. I'm going to leave you with this one. And I know that we're still 2.5 weeks away from the trade deadline, so things could change. But right now, on the day of the All-Star Game, July the 17th, Tim Kurkjian's World Series prediction, best team in the AL, best team in the NL are?
I'm going to say, I'm going to stick with what I went with at the beginning of the year, not like, hey, I'm too stubborn to change, because it doesn't matter. But I think Houston eventually is going to be the best team in the American League just because the strength of their starting pitching, and they're going to address that closer situation. And I think the Cubs are going to be the best team in the National League, and I think those two teams will play in the World Series. But, Dan, as you know, I'll change my mind next week based on a big trade or something else. That's how baseball works.
Tim, I think that was my pick at the beginning of the season, too. So you know what? I'll double down on that one for you so we both look smart when it's all said and done. Great job, as always, Tim. I really look forward to catching up with you each and every time. And enjoy the game tonight. It should be a heck of a lot of fun.
Okay, Dan. Thank you.
All right, there's Tim Kurkjian of ESPN. And remember, ESPN Radio's coverage of the Major League Baseball All-Star Game will commence tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Tim and a cast of thousands from down there in Nationals Park. So it's interesting with some of the things that he had to say there. And, you know, first off, as far as the Bryce Harper, Manny Machado situation, it looks like that Harper could maybe find his way back to D.C. I don't necessarily think that, you know, his performance in the home run derby is going to be indicative of anything that is going to maybe make him stick around at home with the ballpark. I think it's still going to come down to dollars and cents and the money at the end of the day. But I think another component of this is certainly one of the things we touched on there with the merchandising aspect and the marketing. You know, there could be some teams out there, not just DC, who of course knows everything that he's about, but, you know, another suitor out there perhaps thinks that, okay, we sign a Bryce Harper, that's going to sell some tickets, that's going to sell some jerseys and some T-shirts and all that other stuff, and it's only going to improve our bottom line when talking about the baseball team. But big picture, when you take a step back and you look at these two leagues and you look at the state of the game right now as it's presently constructed, I think it's fair to say, you know, there's not as much drama as a whole on the American League side of things. The 5 teams that I mentioned there are pretty much locked in for playoff spots. I don't know if the Oakland A's are going to continue to have the horses to be able to continue on their pursuit of Seattle and grab one of those other wild card spots in the American League unless they go out there and make another move, which I don't know if Billy Beane is prone to do so. If anything, we thought that the Oakland A's were going to be sellers at the trade deadline, not necessarily buyers. So that's number one that bears watching. Over on the National League side of things, you have a lot more parity because you have the 3 teams in the National League East with Philly, Atlanta, and Washington. You want to see if the Nats can kickstart their season into high gear. The Phils and the Braves have played well above their heads. Remember, 2019 was supposed to be the year that the Phils and the Braves were going to be legit contenders, not in 2018. So I wonder how active each of their respective front offices are going to be in terms of maybe selling a bit of tomorrow in the future to try to make a run at this thing here, which would be considered a little ahead of schedule. As far as the Central's concerned, you got the Cubs, you got the Milwaukee Brewers. Brewers are in a nosedive right now, having lost 8 of their last 10. They're really starting to struggle when it comes to the starting pitching department. You know, Jimmy Nelson is a guy who hasn't pitched for them all year, and who knows when he's going to be able to return to the rotation. And a guy like Zach Davies, who was a very productive pitcher for them a season ago, he's been hampered by injuries all season long. And some of these other guys that have stepped up and kind of held down the fort for them are starting to give out a little bit. So they need to go out and get a pitcher if they want to continue on their charge. And the National League West, Dodgers and Diamondbacks looked like they were going to be dead and buried earlier on, really went in bad funks and couldn't snap out of it, but they found their way back into it. Now they're probably the front runners in that division, but the Rockies and the Giants are hanging around a little bit, so that NL West is now a 4-team race. So a lot more parity, a lot more teams in the mix on the National League side of things, which is a heck of a lot of fun. When you're hiring, you don't want to waste time sorting through dozens of irrelevant resumes. You want an efficient way to get to a short list of qualified candidates. That's why you need Indeed.com. Post a job in minutes, set up screener questions based on your job requirements, then zero in on qualified candidates using an intuitive online dashboard. Discover why 3 million businesses use Indeed for hiring. Post a job today at Indeed.com/hire. Search for greatness. Search Indeed. We talked about the faces of baseball earlier and how identifiable some of their stars are compared to others in other sports. A story out of the Washington Post shed some light onto that, and I think that you are going to be surprised by its findings. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. It's ESPN Radio.
Ow. Yep, you guessed it. I'm a speed bump, so I've got one job. I slow you down. So imagine how I feel about Geico, who does way more. Like, not only could they save you money on car insurance, but they've been around for over 75 years, giving people fast and friendly claim service. Ow. Plus, they got a nifty mobile app that gives you 24/7 access. Ow. Just doing my job, buddy.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Cars, homes, boats, motorcycles, RVs, and more at Progressive.com. Now, ladies and gentlemen, now that it's warming up, it's time to get out to the stadium and catch a few ball games or take your lady to a show or her favorite concert. She will love it. The official ticket partner of ESPN has you covered. Go to vividseats.com/ESPN for your exclusive discount offer. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. Smith here on ESPN Radio. Great stuff. We just heard from Tim Kurkjian. 888-729-3776 is the telephone number if you want to be part of the program. Just to wrap up on baseball, then we'll switch back over to the latest on the NFL and Le'Veon Bell, which we talked about a lot on yesterday's program. But earlier in the show, I brought up the identifiability factor of baseball and its challenges with marketing its players versus some of these other sports who are certainly more identifiable with the top players to even the younger generation out there. You know, everybody knows the superstars in the NFL. They know the superstars in the NBA. But baseball, you know, we've asked that question pretty much for the past decade. You know, who's the face of baseball? You know, who is the most identifiable player in baseball? Is it Bryce Harper? Is it Mike Trout? You know, when Jeter was still playing at the very end, you know, you say, well, Jeter was the face of baseball. Okay, maybe. But other than that, what else are you going on to? You know, what are you looking at right now when you're trying to pinpoint, all right, who are the guys that I'm going to have out front to sell my sport? So there was a story that I came across out of the Washington Post, as a matter of fact. And they came up with this this testing method, calling it Q scores. Mike Trout scored a 22 in the Q scores awareness category. You know, how identifiable he was to the general population, so on and so forth. What the 22 indicates is that it means a little more than 1 in 5 Americans even know who he is. 1 in 5. All right, not terrible, right? But if you want to make that comparison versus an NBA player, 1 out of 5, Mike Trout's score is equal to that of none other than, and you're going to be thinking it's some all-star player, you know, an Olympic player, you know, one of the faces of the game. No. Try Kenneth Faried, a forward who is now a member of the Brooklyn Nets. He was just traded from the Denver Nuggets. Okay? Not a star player. Nice player, but certainly not a household name. So you mean to tell me, and again, I have to really question the legitimacy and the merits of this score and this method, that you really mean to tell me that Mike Trout, who is the best player in baseball, is on par and in the same category with Kenneth Faried? That's hard to believe. And if that's the case, then you know what? Maybe baseball's got more problems than we're led on to believe. And maybe that I believe right now. Kenneth Faried is as identifiable as the best player in Major League Baseball. That's a problem. 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Glenn in Dallas is up next. Glenn, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Good, Glenn. What's going on?
All right, so I'm going to give my kind of input on this. I was growing up. I grew up in the Midwest, so I'm a Reds fan.
Okay.
And at the time, Cincinnati Reds had the big red machine with David Concepcion and Tony Perez and Johnny Bench and Pete Rose and keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can name like one player on the team now, and that's actually a team that I quasi follow.
Mm-hmm.
When you kind of asked, where is baseball for you? And I think you started to hit on it a second ago. You know, one, it's behind the NFL for me. It's behind the NBA. Quite frankly, it's behind college football. And part of the reason of that is, you know, you don't know a lot of the guys. And baseball does a horrible job. I don't get it. I can't really understand it, but they do a terrible job promoting the stars and the players. Like, let's say Clayton Kershaw is one of your top guys.
Right.
right? You got Steph Curry advertising for milk. He's advertising for cars. He's doing all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even think when I've seen one national commercial, not a regional commercial, a national commercial with a guy like Clayton Kershaw, or name anybody, for milk, a car, gasoline, keep going.
Yeah.
And I think baseball, in order to win back some of the younger guys, because, I mean, I'm not that guy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get kids between 13 and 25, you got to communicate with them in a different way. You got to make the sport a little more exciting. You got to promote the players and encourage them by promoting the players and not just the Reds organization or the Dodgers or the Yankees. You know, get Judge or get Clayton Kershaw for the Dodgers. If he's the best, one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball, he needs to be doing, you know, commercials for hot dogs and for milk and all the stuff.
And Glenn, you know what? You're preaching to the choir. You're 1,000% right. And that is a challenge that Rob Manfred, who runs the sport, speaks about openly. And the powers that be with Major League Baseball, they talk about quite often. How do we get our stars out there a little bit more? You know, I'll give you another example, too. Forget about just the NBA and the NFL on our soil here in the United States. There are probably kids out there who know these soccer stars. We just got done with the World Cup. Ronaldo, Messi, Neymar. I mean, go down the list, not even in that exclusive company. They know those guys more than they know guys playing Major League Baseball, some of the top players. And a lot of it has to do with video games and playing the FIFA game and whatnot. They know these players. You know, they're popping up in commercials left and right, more so than even maybe some Major League Baseball players are. That is a fact. Butch is in Louisville. Butch, you're on ESPN Radio.
Hey there. You know what? And I call my sports platforms all the time here in town. Every so often we talk about baseball. But listen, first of all, I don't think that Mike Trout's the best player in baseball. I'm sorry.
Who is?
You got to give it to a pitcher, man. If I go see a baseball game,
no,
a whole weekend series. Listen, Kershaw, Chris Sale, they're going to strike out 10 batters. They're not going over 4.
Yeah, but Butch, a pitcher can't be considered the best player in baseball, especially a starter. They pitch once every 5 days. You got to give it to an everyday player. It's an everyday player.
I got you on that. But, you're right, they don't mark it. I'll say Altuve is another person.
Jose Altuve is a great player, and he shows up now in commercials a little bit because the Astros are, certainly the defending world champs and whatnot, but not to the extent that some of these other guys are being marketed in the other sports. Not even close. I would say, and again, I'm not keeping track, Butch, and I thank you for the phone call, but if I'm just going off the top of my head right now, I would probably have to say that the guy who is marketed the most in baseball is Bryce Harper. Because he's got the look, he's got that, the hair and kind of that glare that he projects into the camera there, and he's a good ball player. It's probably Bryce Harper, more so than even Mike Trout. I mean, Mike Trout was in Subway commercials. But Mike Trout wasn't like in Subway commercials by himself. He was in a Subway commercial with like other athletes and like gymnasts. I mean, how many people know who the average gymnast is? And you're going to put them alongside Mike Trout? You're just saying that he's really not that any more special than some of these other athletes who don't play Major League Baseball. Hey, when was the last time you were at the game or concert? Go to vividseats.com/ESPN today for your exclusive discount offer. Vivid Seats, the official ticketing partner of ESPN. Le'Veon Bell and the Steelers failed to come to an agreement on a long-term deal. He's going to play under the franchise tag again for 2018. His agent says start to throw a farewell parade because chances are that's his last year with the black and gold. What does it mean for him? What does it mean for the Steelers? What does it mean for the rest of the NFL and the running back market? We'll talk about that next. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. It's ESPN Radio.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Dan Graca in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio. Don't forget to get triple action protection for optimal engine performance with Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776. You could get me on Twitter at Dan Graca, Graca. So we spent a lot of time on the show yesterday talking about the pending 4 p.m. deadline for the franchise tag players to come to a long-term agreement with their respective clubs, or else they were going to have to play under the tag once again and not have the opportunity to sign up long-term with their respective teams. And the most prominent name was Le'Veon Bell of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who did not come to an agreement with the franchise before the deadline yesterday. And with everything that has transpired here, it seems as if this is going to be Le'Veon Bell's last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. His agent said as much. I think when you look at the economics and when it boils down to everything, we've talked about it plenty of times, how if you slap the tag on a player for the third consecutive season, which is what would be happening for Pittsburgh in 2019, you'd have to pay the player 144% more than the previous year. So you're talking about a $21 million price tag for Le'Veon Bell, a guy who plays the running back position, and it's just not feasible. Bell tweeted out and said that he's going to work as hard as he's ever worked, and he's going to have a special season here for the Steelers. And if you're a fan of the Steelers, that's what you hope. And if you're the franchise, that's what you hope. I don't think that he is going to threaten to hold out or miss games or skip games, because remember, he's going to be getting paid a nice chunk of change this year under that franchise tag when you're talking about $14.5 million. So if he were to miss a game, if they were going to, if he was going to lose a game check, that's pretty significant. That's just under a shade of $1 million. All right. Nobody's going to give up that type of money knowing that the outcome is going to really be any different than what it would have been beforehand. So it's unfortunate that things came down this way. There's been reports out there that the Steelers offered 5 years, $70 million. So when you look at the average annual value, that's right in the neighborhood of what Bell was going to be making here with the franchise tag. But that really, you have to kind of peel back the layers there and realize that the guaranteed money is something that was never reported. So you could talk about a $13, $14 million a year average annual value, but that's not to say that he's going to get all the money that he deems worthwhile. And the problem with Le'Veon Bell here, and it's a tough shoe to be put into here, is that he thinks he should be paid like a playmaker, a wide receiver, if you will, not just a running back. And unfortunately, that doesn't work out that way. Because you could say what you want about his teammate Antonio Brown and some of these other pass catchers in the National Football League, but those guys also aren't carrying the ball as frequently as Le'Veon Bell is. Remember, Le'Veon Bell led the NFL in rushes last year. He ran the ball over 320 times. All right, so at the end of the day, that's what your business card says. You are a running back. And I understand that, unfortunately for him, he plays a position which isn't as valued to maybe the extent that it once was in the National Football League. And when you look at some of these other contracts that running backs are being paid in the NFL, there is a steep drop-off from even that $14.5 million price tag he's going to get with the franchise number. So he's going to have to go out there, have a special year, hope that he stays healthy. And then once free agency hits next offseason, you're talking about a player who's still only going to be, if my math is correct, 27 years old when he enters free agency? There still should be a lot of mileage in that tank. And then it's going to open up a world of possibilities in free agency. Clubs that have a boatload of cap space are going to be major players for Le'Veon Bell's services, because he now is going to jump to the front of the list and become the number one free agent for the National Football League once we get to next offseason. Just thinking aloud right now and not having the list in front of me, when you look at teams with cap space, what about a team like the New York Jets, who are going to have a ton of money? They had a ton of money to play with this past offseason. They're going to have even more, well over $100 million in cap space to put towards 2019. They drafted young Sam Darnold, who's going to be their franchise quarterback, whether it happens this year or at the very least probably 2019. But they don't have necessarily a ton of weapons that jump out at you at the skill positions on the offensive side of the football. So certainly you would think that that would be a team that would be in the market for a Le'Veon Bell services. You want to have a young quarterback and surround him with as many capable players as possible. I would think that they would certainly be a suitor, as well as a lot of other clubs out there, if they could come up with enough dough to be able to make this thing work. But it's unfortunate the way things work out. Football, it's a different business right now when you look at some of these other sports. Baseball, you have the guaranteed contracts. The NBA, you have the guaranteed contracts. You know, Todd Gurley of the Rams, who is another guy who's going to be in line for a big payday in the near future. You wonder how this Le'Veon Bell situation working itself out is going to factor into a guy like Gurley when his time comes for a new contract, because he is certainly one of the top backs in all the game. It's just unfortunate that where they are right now in this league, teams are valuing the position more so than the individual talent. And I think that that's how they're going about operating as a business. You look at the running back position as opposed to just Le'Veon Bell, the star back, or Todd Gurley, the star running back, some of the top playmakers in all the National Football League. So it's going to be somebody else's gain probably next offseason, but that still shouldn't take away from what the Pittsburgh Steelers could accomplish this year, because as we said yesterday, for my money, they are, I think, the odds-on favorite to get to a Super Bowl if everything breaks right for them in the AFC, and that includes teams like the New England Patriots as well. Good show today. Enjoy that All-Star game tonight in D.C. Another opportunity for baseball to showcase its finest. We will be all over it again in the coming days. Dan Graca saying goodbye in for Stephen A. today on ESPN Radio. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.